What if you are not who you think you are? What if the version of you that walks through life performing, conforming, surviving is merely a mask? A role rehearsed so many times it feels real, but underneath that role, buried beneath years of expectation, fear, and routine, there's someone else, someone quieter, stranger, more real, and maybe more dangerous. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." It's 4 words, yet they carried the weight of an entire life's work, a challenge, a warning, and an invitation. But who exactly is this you he wants you to become? And why is the journey toward that hidden self so excruciating, yet so essential? In today's world, dominated by algorithms, image maintenance, and endless comparison, the idea of being your true self has become both a battlefield. We hear it in TED Talks and Instagram captions. We see it marketed in self-help books and lifestyle brands. Yet the average person still feels more lost than ever. We wear psychological armor. We choose safety over soul. We adapt. We survive. But we don't become. And Nietzsche, like the comforting voices of modern culture, didn't offer easy answers. He didn't want you to find yourself through a vision board or a personality test. He wanted you to suffer your way to it, to face your shadows, to peel away your borrowed identities, to be reborn it as something prettier or more successful, but as something truer, as something that couldn't be replicated, explained, or packaged. This script isn't just a dive into Nietzsche's philosophy. It's an exploration of what it means to break free from the machinery of imitation and expectation. It's about the psychological war between the person you pretend to be and the self that's quietly watching from the depths. It's about ancient myths, modern psychology, and the sobering realization that authenticity comes with a cost. So in the next few chapters, we'll journey together through history, mind, soul, and society. We'll look at what it really means to become who you are and why so many avoid this path. You'll see how ancient thinkers, modern science, personal reflection all echo the same eternal truth. You were not made to fit in. You were made to emerge. But emergence, it's a violent birth, ready to go deeper. To understand what Nietzsche meant by become who you are, we have to realize that this wasn't a slogan, it was a rebellion. A rebellion against centuries of conformity, against moral systems that tamed the soul, against a world that conditioned people to serve roles instead of seek truth. In ancient Greece, where Nietzsche often turned for inspiration, the idea of selfhood was intertwined with fate and virtue. Socrates, standing in the agora, proclaimed that the unexamined life is not worth living. To him, self-knowledge was the highest form of existence. But even then, the self was understood in relation to reason, virtue, and societal balance. You were meant to find your place, not necessarily to forge your essence. Then came Christianity, which redefined the self through the lens of obedience and sin. The true self became something inherently broken, something to be saved by your own striving, but by surrender. Nietzsche saw this as the beginning of a great decline, a taming of the human spirit. Kay called it slave morality, a system that glorified meekness, guilt, and conformity over strength, creativity, and individual will. By the time Nietzsche was writing in the 19th century, Europe was standing on the ruins of enlightenment, optimism, and religious certainty. Science was booming, but meaning was crumbling. The Industrial Revolution had turned human beings into gears and machines. Schools molded children to be obedient workers. Morality was no longer divine, but still wielded like a leash. People were good, not because they were whole, but because they were manageable. This is the world Nietzsche screamed into. He didn't just want people to be themselves. He wanted them to overcome themselves, to destroy the inherited parts that no longer served them. He introduced the idea of the Übermensch, overman, the one who creates their own values and lives, not by the rules of society, but by the dictates of their deepest, most authentic instincts. Becoming who you are in this vision isn't about expressing a pre-made identity. It's about creating it through confrontation, suffering, and radical honesty. But Nietzsche wasn't alone in this. The idea of self-becoming can be found across cultures and ages. In Sufi tradition, the journey of the self is described as passing through nafs, kalb, thay, and ra. It is a spiritual purification, burning away illusion, pride, and falsehood until the true essence emerges. Much like Nietzsche, the Sufis didn't idealize comfort. They revered the fire that refines. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of Atman refers to the true self, which is often buried beneath my illusion. The goal is not to become something new, but to remember who you already are, beyond the social conditioning and desires of the ego. Even in ancient myths, we see this theme repeated. In the Greek story of Theseus, the hero enters the labyrinth to slay the Minotaur. But symbolically, he enters the depths of the psyche to face the beast within. In Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey Later, used by Jung and modern psychologists, self must leave the ordinary world, face trials, descend into darkness, and return transformed. Whether through Nietzsche's hammer or the mystic's surrender, the message is clear. The self is not handed to you. It must be wrestled into being. And yet, in modern culture, the very idea of becoming yourself has been distorted. We are taught to optimize, not actualize. We pursue likes instead of inner light. We are handed labels, empath, sigma, alpha, as if they were destinies instead of temporary masks. The digital age gives us endless mirrors, but very little reflection. What Nietzsche demands is not an aesthetic performance, but an inner revolution. So, before we move forward, ask yourself this. When you say, "This is just who I am," are you speaking from truth or from habit? 'Cause the hardest prison to escape is the one you no longer realize you're in. If Nietzsche gave us the fire, modern psychology gave us the blueprint of the mind it burns through, okay? When he said, "Become who you are," he wasn't speaking about uncovering a static truth, but rather evolving, layer by layer, into a version of yourself unshackled from fear, conformity, and the inherited voices that echo in your head. In this evolution, psychology confirms it's more than just an act of will. It's a confrontation with the unconscious. Carl Jung, deeply influenced by Nietzsche, believed that the self is not something readily available at the surface. It's buried beneath what he called the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. Okay, your job title, your social identity, the opinions you feel safe expressing. This is the persona. It helps you survive in the world, but it's not who you truly are. Beneath the mask lies the shadow, the parts of yourself you reject, deny, or disown. Anger, lust, ambition, chaos, genius, all the energies that don't fit the image you were told to maintain. To Jung and, by extension, Nietzsche, the journey to becoming your true self isn't about self-improvement. It's about integration. The real you is not the nice version of yourself. It's the whole of you, shadow and light, fear and courage, doubt and desire. Nietzsche understood this long before it was mapped out in psychological terms. He saw that true individuality only emerges after a spiritual rebellion, psychological death. But why is it so hard to be who we are? Because from birth, we are conditioned to conform. Family systems, school systems, religious structures all ask us to prioritize belonging over becoming. Social psychologist Erich Fromm argued that most people choose conformity not because they want to, but because they fear freedom. "To be free," he said, "is terrifying because it means taking full responsibility for your life. No gods, no parents, no saviors. Just you and the choices you make." Modern psychology speaks of self-actualization, a term popularized by Abraham Maslow. At the top of Maslow's pyramids sits the self-actualized person, someone who is creative, spontaneous, morally autonomous, and unafraid of truth. But here's the catch. Maslow estimated that less than 1% of people ever reach this stage. Why? Because it demands not only potential, but deep courage. Even newer studies in cognitive behavioral therapy show how our thoughts are shaped by unconscious beliefs, many of which were formed in childhood. These beliefs can become cages. I must succeed to be loved. If I express anger, I'll be abandoned. My worth is in my productivity. Left unchecked, they govern our lives. And the worst part, we don't even realize it. In this light, Nietzsche's call to become who you are is not poetic, it's psychological warfare. You must examine every belief, every reaction, every fear. You must decide which parts of you are real and which were planted there by someone else's fear. But this isn't about rejection, it's about transformation. Just as a snake sheds its skin to grow, the psyche must let go of outdated roles. Jung called this process individuation. Nietzsche called it the creation of the self. The Sufis called it fan, the annihilation of the ego. Whatever the language, the path is the same. Down into the dark, through the fire, and up into something truer. Not prettier, not safer, but real. There is a quiet grief that follows a life unlived. A gnawing sense that something is off, not loud enough to disrupt your daily routine, but always lingering. It shows up as burnout in your career, numbness in your relationships, anxiety in your silence. It's the soul's way of reminding you that you've strayed too far from who you really are. And the more you ignore it, the louder it becomes, until one day the whisper becomes a scream. And by then, it often feels too late. Nietzsche warned of this slow-souled death. When he spoke of becoming, he wasn't romanticizing the process, he was warning us of the cost of neglect. He saw what happens when people trade their individuality for comfort, their courage for belonging, their creativity for approval. He called them last men, not evil, not wicked, just ... tired, boring, safe. They avoid discomfort at all costs, fear greatness, and live for distraction. They confuse peace with numbness. And their tragedy is not that they suffer, but that they never truly lived. Modern psychology echoes this. A life lived inauthentically results in what existential psychologists call existential guilt, a haunting sense that you've betrayed your own potential. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, believed that meaning, not happiness, is what the soul truly craves. When we ignore that search, we experience what he termed the existential vacuum. It's why so many feel empty even with success. It's why depression often hides in high achievers, because productivity without authenticity is just noise. And socially, the consequences compound. People stuck in false selves struggle to form real connections. If you're constantly adapting to what others expect, how can anyone ever truly know you? Intimacy becomes performance. Relationships become negotiation. You say what's expected, not what's true. And over time, the mask fuses to the skin. You forget what your real face looks like. Think of Narcissus not just as a vain boy who drowned in his reflection, but as a symbol of modern identity, obsessed with image, detached from essence. We live in a time where curated selves parades as truth, where your value is determined by engagement metrics, where depth is sacrificed for visibility. Nietzsche would have called it a crisis of the soul, a mass hallucination that substitutes applause for authenticity. But these aren't just poetic ideas. The data speaks to. Studies show that chronic self-suppression, denying one's emotions, voice, or truth, leads to higher risks of anxiety, depression, autoimmune disorders, and even early mortality. Psychologists like Gabor have drawn direct lines between repressed identity and physical illness. The body keeps a score, as Bessel van der Kolk wrote. When you abandon who you are, the body rebels. Yet even in ancient stories, this theme of self-abandonment leading to suffering is universal. In Greek mythology, the goddess Psyche must undergo brutal trials to reunite with her lost love, Charis, but symbolically, it's the soul journeying to reclaim its passion, a metaphor for integration. Case at it, the lover must burn in the fire of separation before uniting with the beloved. In Buddhist lore, the self must die to illusion before it awakens. In every tradition, truth demands sacrifice. And perhaps that is the greatest tragedy of modern life. We want the reward of authenticity without the pain of becoming us. But you cannot bypass the fire, okay? If you refuse to face the consequences of living falsely, okay? You will inherit a life that looks full on the outside, but feels hollow within. Nietzsche understood this better than most. He saw madness not as an illness, but sometimes as the price of too much truth too soon. He risked everything to say what others wouldn't, and, in the end, the world dismissed him as mad. But, perhaps, he was the only one sane enough to scream, 'cause when the cost of being real is too high, most people settle for a cheaper identity. And that is how empires of the soul collapse, quietly, politely, and in plain sight. So, how do you actually become who you are? Nietzsche gave us the challenge, but not the roadmap. That's the terrifying beauty of it. There's no step-by-step manual, because your path is unrepeatable. No one has lived your story, carried your wounds, or heard your inner voice quite the way you do. The journey inward is not a formula to suffice, but there are tools, anchors, ancient and modern practices that can help you peel away the false and protect the sacred. The first, perhaps most essential step, is radical self-honesty. This isn't the kind of honesty that merely admits mistakes. It's a terrifying kind that strips away the roles you've been performing for years. Sitting with a journal and asking, what do I pretend to like? Who do I become around others? What part of me have I locked away because it didn't feel acceptable? Write the answers. Let them bleed out. Don't edit them. Don't dress them up. It's the first step to becoming who you are is acknowledging who you are not. In modern therapy, especially internal family systems and shadow work, there's a powerful idea. We're not one fixed self, but a system of parts. Some parts protect, some parts perform, and some are exiled. The true self isn't any one part. It's the compassionate center that can listen to them all. You don't need to destroy your ego or banish your flaws, okay? You need to befriend them, to bring them into the light. Integration, not elimination, is the key. Journaling, especially stream of consciousness writing, is a powerful daily ritual, but pair it with stillness. In silence, the persona loses its grip. In meditation, the masks fall off. You start to notice the patterns, the way you fidget when you're insecure, the stories you tell yourself when you're not enough, the rituals of self-sabotage. Its awareness is the beginning of transformation. Now, look beyond psychology reach into ancient wisdom. The Stoics practiced negative visualization, imagining loss, hardship, or death, not to create anxiety, but to strip life down to its essence. In doing so, they saw what truly mattered. You can do the same. Ask, if I had 1 year left, which parts of me would I finally stop hiding? Which masks would I tear off? From Sufism, we learn the value of inner burning, not in the literal sense, okay, but as a spiritual metaphor. Die before you die, the mystics say. Meaning, let your false self perish while you still have time. Let the ego dissolve, so your soul can lead. Practices like Sufi, whirling, ecstatic poetry, or silent contemplation were not aesthetic. They were rituals of ego death. You don't have to follow their path exactly, but you must find your own fire, something that purifies you. In modern terms, even cognitive behavioral tools can help. Catch the thought that says, I'll never be good enough. Interrogate it. Where did it come from? A parent? A teacher? A culture obsessed with performance? Challenge it. Replace it. Rewire your mind, one belief at a time, because often the bars of the prison are made of thought. So most importantly, create. Nietzsche believed in the power of art, of willful expression. Write your story, paint your demons, dance your grief. Authenticity isn't just discovered, it's forged. The world gave you a small script, burn it, and write your own. You don't have to know the whole plot, just begin. There's no perfect moment to start becoming. You don't need permission, You don't need clarity. You only need the courage to admit that the life you're living isn't the whole story, and the humility to begin the rewrite. Because the self isn't something you find at the end of the road. It's something you build, brick by brick, in the fire of your own becoming. So now we return to the question, who are you, really? Not the name on your ID, not the roles you perform, not the curated personality you've assembled like armor to survive the world. Beneath all of it, when the lights go off, when you're alone with your thoughts, when no one is watching, who remains? This is the question Nietzsche wrestled with his entire life. And it's the question he threw like a burning torch into the hands of every person daring enough to look inward. For him, life was not about comfort, obedience, or even success. It was about becoming, constant, evolving confrontation with what is real, what is you, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. In a world obsessed with speed, image, and validation, Nietzsche's message is more vital than ever. We are bombarded with distractions that keep us from facing ourselves. We numb our discomfort with noise. We trade depth for convenience. But there is no shortcut to authenticity. No algorithm will deliver you to your soul. That journey must be walked, step by step, through your own inner wilderness. And yet, the reward is immeasurable. To become who you are is not to become better than others. It's to become different from who you were yesterday. It's to live without shame, to speak without performance, to love without fear, to stand in your truth even if your voice trembles. It is not perfection, it is presence. It's a full, raw, unpolished, you finally allowed to breathe. This path is ancient. The mystics knew it, The poets sang of it. The philosophers bled it into their work. From Socrates to Jung, from Rumi to Nietzsche, the call has always been the same. Wake up, break the mask, return to your essence. You may lose people on this path. You may lose comfort, certainty, and approval. But what you gain is something no one can take from you, your own soul, in your own hands. And maybe that is the final paradox, that to find yourself, you must first be willing to lose the self others built for you. So, who are you beneath the noise? And are you brave enough to find out if something stirred in you while listening to this? Don't ignore it. That quiet discomfort, that flicker of recognition, that subtle ache in your chest that says, I've been living too small. That's not just emotion. That's the real you knocking. Not the version the world molded, but the one that's been waiting, watching, silently asking, when will it be my turn? This channel exists for that part of you. Here, we're not chasing trends or feeding you surface-level hacks. We're peeling back the layers. We're diving deep to psychology, philosophy, history, myth, and soul. We talk about the hard things: identity, power, fear, healing, self-sabotage. We ask questions that don't fit neatly into reels or 10-second sound bites, because you deserve more than shallow answers. If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit the mold, if you've questioned the scripts you were handed, if you sense there's something in you the world hasn't seen yet, this is your space. You're not alone in this. We're building a community of thinkers, feelers, seekers, and rebels, people brave enough to face their shadows and carve their own path. So, if this resonated with you, consider subscribing, not just to get more content, but to commit to your becoming. Let this be more than just another video you scroll past. Let it be a marker, a line in the sand, a quiet promise to yourself. I will not abandon who I am becoming. In the videos ahead, we'll keep digging. We'll explore the unseen forces that shape us, the old wisdom that still whispers truth, and the practices that help you step into your deepest self with clarity and power. Because your life isn't meant to be copied. It's sometimes all it takes is a single spark to light the fire of your own transformation. So will you walk the path, or will you let the mask win? If you're ready, we're here. Let's become. Like, subscribe, share it with someone who's ready to hear this, And in the comments, tell us, what part of yourself Have you been hiding for too long?